What's up, guys? My name is Swaggy C, your host for the Pepsi Music Lab Summit of 2022. In our panel discussion today, we are talking maximizing your potential. In this session, we'll be focusing on A&R and what it means for young artists making their way into the industry. For every artist who blows up and goes multi-platinum, there are countless others who show promise, get a deal, and still fall short. Our two panelists today know better than anyone else what it takes for young musicians to realize their potential and turn their talents into sustained success. Baroline Diaz, aka Baroline, is one of the most lit and innovative A&Rs in the industry. She started out at Def Jam, assisting on national campaigns for 2 Chainz and YG, who gave her the name Baroline, which has stuck ever since. From there, she's moved on into A&R at Columbia Records, where she signed Polo G, aka Mr. Cap-A-Lot, and immediately earned the label a double platinum record with Pop Out. She quickly jumped from there to Interscope Records, where she is now VP of A&R. And at Interscope, she's been the driving force behind the success of superstars like DaBaby and rising stars like Lil Papa. We also have Ian Holder, who has seen the side of the music industry over the past 2 decades. He started out at Epic before being taken on as A&R coordinator at Sony, working closely with Lil Flip and Exhibit. In 2007, he moved to BMI, where he stayed for a decade as director of writer-publisher relations, signing an incredible array of songwriters, including Post Malone, Frank Ocean, Ray Shremmerd, Kiara, Made in Tokyo, and Pusha T. He's now the senior vice president of creative at Sony Music Publishing, where he signed Moneybagg Yo, Lil TJ, Lil Durk, and Jack Harlow, among many others. Ian has also started his own label, his own management company, and Artistic Reality Through Search, aka Arts, a music business program for high school teenagers. Welcome, guys. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Yes, you guys have a lot going on, but listen, Baroline, I really want to start from the top here, because you have been somebody who's tapped in with artists early on. You always keep your ears to the streets, and we see them almost blow up immediately after that. What did you see in these artists early on that gravitated you towards them?
I feel like it's kind of weird because sometimes the artists don't really like label people, and no offense to label people, but like the artists are like, they don't really want people around. And for some reason, I just get cool with the artists and I just build personal relationships with them, which sometimes could be good, sometimes could be bad. And we could get into that in further conversation. But, you know, I've been blessed to have amazing relationships with my artists and build records from the top to the bottom. Like I've been with DaBaby since day one that he's got signed to Interscope, and like it's just moments that are special. Like I remember T Faris, who manages Megan Thee Stallion, has said cash it. And like at that time, Megan Thee Stallion was not Megan Thee Stallion, and DaBaby wasn't who DaBaby is now. And I was like, yo, you need to do this record because I know that you and her are about to be the next biggest artist. And he was like, what? I'm like, yes, like she fired. And I'm like, you need to talk to her like you her boyfriend on this record. Like you need to go in. And he killed it. And then we put it out. And then it just went crazy. It was like, what the hell? Like just to see like when you put in hard work or when records are made and then you just get on in a car and you hear the records, that just makes you want to work harder and develop artists. And I feel like right now is like an important stage in music to like actually make good music because of stuff like TikTok and all of that. Like you have a lot of fast records and a lot of fast success. So I'm right now in a place where I want to build longevity artists that are bringing successful careers in and are not just hot in the moment. So I spend a lot of time with my artists, making sure their mental health is right, making sure like they're stable, they want to work, they're in the mood to go to the studio and actually make good records. So, I mean, I've been fortunate to work with so many artists like Moneybagg Yo on his last album, ESTG. I signed Moray, who has the record Quicksand. So I've been blessed to be A&R on a bunch of amazing artists. So I think right now it's just focusing on who's the next rising star and who's willing to put in the work and be the next superstar. Because a lot of the kids that are out now, like the Durks and Moneybagg, like they've been working for years. It's not overnight. I think some people may look at them and be like, damn, Dirk is lit, but like Dirk been in the game for a long
been doing
time.
this
And he
for a
hates when
long
I say
time.
that, but I'm like you've been putting in work, and I think he's a perfect example of an artist. When you do the work, what happens, and the success that you could get when you actually continue and stay focused and build a longevity career. Because he's been in the game for so long, and right now he's touching his real success. So I think
Right.
it's an important time for artists to put that work in.
Right. Yeah, definitely nothing but work. And Ian, you've signed a lot of artists, especially on the A&R side and in the publishing side. And all these artists are different. That's the key right there. But you also have artists that could be on the complete opposite sides of the spectrum, like a Moneybag Yo and a Frank Ocean. But do you feel like do you see one quality or a trait in them that you've noticed that they share, although they can be on opposite sides of the spectrum?
Absolutely. I think what Baroline was touching on was a key point. What I've noticed is there's a singular drive that these type of artists that you mentioned have that separates them from the pack. So it's when I get in front of artists and songwriters, because remember, it's not just artists, it's also songwriters on my end. Um, I look for a fire that just is relentless, that is persistent, and they're gonna push me as much as I can push them. That's a common denominator that I find in not only successful people just in our space, in our music space, but just in business period. It's just that, to say it this way, it's that mamba mentality, like Kobe used to say. So talent is one thing, you know what I'm saying, but having the drive, the intuition, the ingenuity to figure it out, and to also be self-reliant, sets you apart from a lot of folks. So I can kind of go down the list of folks in terms of what stuck out, but the biggest common denominator that I've seen is just a lot of things start with them. Creative divisions, creative inspiration, and the vision starts with the artist and the songwriter, and it should, but being able to have the willingness to kind of stay at it, and just to, when you get your bumps in the road, to still keep pushing. That's a common denominator that I think the most successful artists and songwriters have.
Yeah, you mentioned that some have to be self-sufficient, and not all are self-sufficient. And Baroline, word is that as an A&R, you describe yourself as being very hands-on. You even told Rolling Stone that you treat your artists like you treat your kids. That's a lot of responsibility. Sometimes these artists don't even want to wake up in the morning and go to the studio, or be at a studio session on time. What does that look like on a day-to-day basis for you?
I think I think the biggest thing is that, like, for a new artist, when they get signed to a label, they think, oh, that's it. Like, you signed to a label. And sometimes I'll be like, now is when you really gotta put in work. Like,
Right.
especially me putting my face on it and posting you, and the label putting money for you, like, to sign you. It's like you got work to do. I feel like a lot of these artists are very comfortable, and I'm a person that's I don't get comfortable. Like, I'm always like, what's next? And I feel like we're in a time where, like, social media, everybody sees like the lavish lifestyle of the artists, and when they're at the Grammys and when they're here, and they don't know, like, you actually have to put in work to get to these positions. So being signed to a major label, yes, it's a celebration, you should celebrate, but that's when you really should be like, I need to get on my A game. To I should be going to the studio. I should be working with other artists. I should be hitting up this artist. Like, some artists is so weird. They're like, I want this feature, and I'm like, okay, you should DM them, and they're like, nah, like, it's like, what's the issue? Like, you're an artist. It's better artist to artist to connect with each other than me say, yo, this artist wants a feature, and it becomes a money thing. Like, I feel like everybody just has these egos nowadays. Like, everybody doesn't want to, like, show that they want. I don't even know how to explain it, but y'all understand what I'm trying to say. Like,
Yeah.
everybody's just, it's just a lot with artists, but there are artists that are amazing that want to put in work. Like, the baby's another example. Like, when we first started working, like, I never saw him say I'm tired. I never saw him complain. Like, the things that we did in 1 year, we were like in SNL, BET Awards, this, that. Like, he went on tour. He was just like wanting to work. And I feel like when artists do the work, good things is gonna come to you. Like you gotta crawl before you walk. So as long as you put in the work, you stay motivated, you build that hustle, like there's nothing you can't do. There's no like I've seen it all. Like artists could do whatever they want to do as long as they're willing to put in the work. And there's a lot of people that bust their ass behind the scenes that the artist may not see. And it's like when an executive or a label gives 100%, we also want 100% from the artist, because we're up all morning sending emails saying doing this and that, and they don't see that. But it's like if you want to be successful, you have to put in the work.
So you stay close to artists, and Ian, I know that you have developed really close relationships with a lot of your artists as well. So why do you feel like that's important, and what does an artist gain from having someone on the A&R side work so closely with them?
Well, value first off, and the only way we can really decide or figure out what type of value we can bring an artist or a project is by really tapping into who they are individually, what drives them, what their motivations are, what their background is, what the story is, really knowing them as a person. But at the end of the day, it comes down to value. And if you can't really bring value to an artist or a songwriter, what are we doing it for? It's a two-way street, and they should be getting the most out of any relationship they might have with the likes of myself or Baroline. And that's always the goal, on my end, and for Sony Music Publishing, we always want to bring the most, but it really requires you to dig in. And so the relationships that Baroline are talking about, it's paramount for what we do. And we can't really be great, at our job if we're not able to tap into, who they are creatively and personally.
I feel like you guys also, you both weigh in a lot creatively. Sometimes people don't think A&Rs do that much, but you spend a lot of time in the studio, and sometimes these recording processes may look a little bit different for each artist, but they also have to build a creative team. So how do you guys build out a creative team and help support artists to maximize their creative potential? Ian, you could start out.
Well, for one, I look at where an artist has started up until this point, and where they're trying to go, like I said before. But it's really, for example, creative team on my end can start with really just surrounding themselves with, the right producers, the right songwriters, and sometimes helping to build out their business in terms of, publishing and how they want to sign songwriters if they have any vision or inspiration or direction to do so. So a lot of that is really kind of getting in with the artist like a Dirk, and helping him build out a roster of creatives that can really, for the most part, take out provide the most of the production for his albums, so. But it's also key co-writes, it's also making sure the vibe and what they're trying to achieve is maximized. So from my end, it's just key collaborations. It's understanding where they're at this point and where they need to go, and who could bring it to the level that they're trying to achieve.
Right. And Baroline, same for you. Do you feel like you have to assist in putting the right creative teams around your artists when they're in the studio?
Yeah, like for instance, I'm working with an artist right now that I just signed, the female artist, and she writes all her raps. But I'm like, I feel like we need something bigger. So I've been bringing in writers to write hooks for her and give her an idea. So she's been taking hooks and then she writes all her verses. And like, it's like making the artist feel comfortable. Like I have had male artists that I'm like, maybe we should get a writer. And they're like, what? I don't need no writer. And I'm like, bro, chill. Like maybe it's somebody that you could have a conversation with, that could have your creative juices flowing, so you guys could create a storyline for a new song. Because sometimes artists can create the same music, or they work with the same producer, the music could all sound the same. Like especially as you elevate dropping albums, fans want to hear you in other sounds. So you have to bring in, if I say, hey, I think you need another sound, they'd be like, what you mean? I have to bring a bunch of producers that could bring that in, and they'll be like, okay, I like this or I don't like that. Same with the writers. Like I try to tell the guys, like, well, maybe you should listen to what they have, and then they'll be like, oh, I like that line. So they could take a line and then write what they're gonna write. But it's just making the artist trust you, because with some of the guys, they be like, it's an ego thing. Nobody wants somebody to write their rap, especially in the rap industry, how it is about writing raps and all of that. But most artists that have the biggest hits, male or female, had a writer in the room, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. So it's just making sure that the artist trusts my vision and we all connected, and just finding the right producers to get their sound and elevate it and take it to the next level.
Yes, I feel like sometimes artists have, their own vision, and sometimes they have something very specific that may get their creative juices going. I spoke to Ty Dolla Sign, and he told me that like SZA likes to record in the studio with like crystals around. I don't know how true that is, but have you guys had any specific moments where an artist might need something that may seem a little bit strange in the studio, or a certain type of setup? Whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, I mean, seen, I've probably seen as much as you could imagine. I've had artists sage rooms before, and the candles all over the place, to having it be the right scent, to having only certain people in the room because of X, Y, and Z. So yeah, I mean, but it's you got to create the atmosphere, one, and that's where a lot of the creativity, they can tap into a certain element that helps enlighten and bring it out. So but at the end of the day, I mean, Baroline touched on something that was key to what she said. It really boils down to trust, and that atmosphere is a part of trust, and that's how everything starts to unravel, um, into which they can really kind of tap into where they're at that moment.
Right. And something that was very interesting is you guys mentioned key roles in the studio, a producer, an engineer, having songwriters or co-writers. Can you guys, or Baroline, can you help break down some of these positions, the most important people you feel like in the studio outside of the artist?
I think the engineer is important, and I think that big artists should have their own personal engineer so they don't come with that problem. I think you go to new studios every day and you just like don't may not like it. So like when I go to Paramount out here in LA, like I love Cigar. He's like amazing. He makes the artist feel comfortable, and he gives a lot of feedback. Like he don't just record you, like he gives my artist feedback. Like you need to fix that, this and that. So like I think the engineer is the biggest important. I think producers are dope, but sometimes an artist wants the producer to leave. Like, okay, you gave me beats, now it's time to go. Some producers just want to kick it. The artist is like, bro, what's up? Like, so it's just about having the right people, like just the energy, like Ian said. Like some artists don't want a lot of people in the room. Some people want everybody in the room. That's how they create their vibe. So I think just the atmosphere, the energy is important. But to me, the most important person in the room is the engineer and the artist. The producer can just send beats or be there for a little while, but the engineer has to record the song. But most artists are learning how to engineer themselves, which is pretty cool nowadays.
Yeah, they have to be multidimensional. Ian, do you feel differently about this?
No, not at all. I think engineers, like Baroline said, most artists, the top artists, have their own guys or ladies, at this moment. So, engineers tend to see artists at their most vulnerable times, good and bad. And a lot of the times it's just them in the room, so a lot of the times they just roll with them from state to state, studio to studio, because it's that level of comfort, and they're the ones that are able to get the most out of them. They're the ones that, a lot of the times could be the voice box, to us, when sessions are moving a certain way, or they can let us know when they're in a different headspace, or they're not in the space to record at the moment. So we work around that. But I would agree, they're one of the most important, if not the most important person in the room. Um, which is great because I also started off as an engineer as well. So I get the importance, in knowing what that connection needs to be.
Right. We do have a lot of upcoming artists who are tuned in with us right now. Shout out to everybody who's been checking in with us on the socials at Pepsi. Now, for the artists who are really getting started out and they may not have access to a studio, let alone an engineer or a producer, how can artists maximize creatively if they do have less resources? And what tools do you guys feel like they may need, literally and figuratively, without kind of compromising the quality?
I feel like I used to do this live when COVID hit, and I used to like add unsigned artists, and it kind of went a little crazy. And I used to tell people like a lot of people within your circle on social media want to be creatives too. So you may know somebody who's an upcoming photographer or videographer that's just like you coming up, like use them as a valuable resource, or your homie who likes to engineer or something like that. Like find out who's in your circle or young people that's coming up with you and use them. Like you may know the next hottest upcoming producer, like, and they never even made a beat, and you could just empower them to start making a beat. So I think just like your power circle, I know that some people record on their phone. Like I think now you could find a way to record, like or just search it online or something. Like you never know. And I feel like there's a lot of programs nowadays opening up that have these resources for artists. I mean, I hope one day major labels could open a studio that allows unsigned artists to come in and record. I think that'd be dope. Maybe you could find your next star like that, something in that
Yeah.
form. But I think just finding out who the next upcoming executives or creatives within your friend group are and just using each other.
What about some of the tools, like the actual, the actual equipment? Because I feel like that's something that, some artists struggle with, getting their hands on a quality mic. I mean, yeah, Kanye recorded, an album on his phone, but he's Kanye. Who's really gonna say something, when he walks in with that piece of work or delivers those files? Ian, do you recommend anything or have any resources for upcoming artists who are trying to get their hands on some quality equipment?
I mean, other than everything is at your fingertips, you know, I don't want to specify, one brand or another, but like producers work on everything nowadays. Every literally, as Baroline said, on phones. And I've seen like dope records be made literally on a phone. So, you know, I think folks like Kanye, and you'd be surprised, like they can hear creativity that is on the next level. They can understand and see what's happening that they want to be a part of, or they can see where music could head if they just had the right, direction or the right stamp of approval or whatever. But I think the biggest thing is just being, as I said before, self-reliant and not making any excuses. Everyone tends to figure it out. But you got to be the ones that push yourself to know what is going on currently, technology wise, where music is headed creatively. And as Baroline said before, it's I didn't understand this until I actually got into it, and I know everybody said it, but you really understand it when you're in it. This business is based around relationships, and for instance, you and I are meeting each other for the first time, but as soon as Baroline walked in or stepped in, when we were prepping for this, you guys had a moment. It's relationships. They carry on, they transcend, and touching to the point that she mentioned before, where as you're growing, know the people that are around you, know the people on your quote unquote level, because as you start to ascend, there's people that rises throughout that level, and those are the ones that end up being connected throughout an entirety of a career. So I've been in this business for close to 20 years now, and there's few people that have been able to be around since I started, but the ones that are, we've all, for easier way of putting it, have leveled up throughout the years. So there's a sense of understanding, there's a sense of camaraderie, and there's also a mindset that I'd like to believe that over time we help bring some value to the industry as a whole. So relationships, and just really pushing yourself to be self-reliant.
Yeah.
They
You
should
guys, go ahead, B.
as a relationships are everything.
Yeah,
Mhm.
they're definitely everything in this industry. You know, music, it transcends though through every single kind of wavelength that you could think of. And you know, what's interesting is how the creativity flows, right? And sometimes I wonder, because you guys sit in on countless sessions and you hear endless music. I can only imagine how many records you might go through a week. But do you ever have to weigh the creativity of a record versus, you know, its commercial appeal and how people in the masses will you know, react to it? I feel like sometimes there might be records that may be too creative, and people might not be able to connect to it on a commercial level. So have you ever tried to weigh one more than the other?
I agree with that, with what you just said, because sometimes an artist, like upcoming artists, they want these big features. So they get this big feature, but it doesn't really do nothing because their fan base is not prepared for something like that. And I've seen that happen multiple times. So I tell a lot of artists, like, why don't you work with an artist that's upcoming like you? And then when you get to a level, or sometimes it may look like the label just paid for this big artist to get on it. So I mean, that could be true, but I always have this statement like, I work with an artist called Babyface Ray, and we have put out a record called Dancing with the Devil with Pusha T, which I like. I'm obsessed. I couldn't even believe Pusha sent me the verse, but relationships is everything. Push see me coming up from Def Jam, like a little sister. So I'm like, Push, can you cut this record for me? And he like, I got you. And then it was like a week, he hit me back. I call him. I'm like, yo, what's up? Like, what's going on? He like, give me 2 days. And he sent it and he killed it. And it has Landstrip Chip on the hook, who's like an amazing writer. Like he's like a superstar. He's an artist that you guys should definitely watch. The record is amazing. It did great. But Ray had posted a record of him. Literally, the video is him in a car rapping. Like, just it was like the Dancing with the Devil record is like next level radio. This record of Ray rapping in a car went so crazy. And I'm like, damn, it's like sometimes there's nothing bigger than the streets. I always say that. Like sometimes you could sit with your team and be like, this is the record, this is the record. But the streets is the one. Like, you know, that doesn't mean that the Dancing with the Devil people, that them saying fans love that record, but they wanted to see the Ray, like regular Ray. They call it, they sometimes they say, oh, they becoming an industry or this or that, or they leaving their fans. But I always say there's nothing bigger than the streets. Like these fans, like they know how they want their artists to sound. So sometimes you may give an artist a record like, oh, this is a radio record, and their fans be like, bro, go in the studio and do the shit you was doing before. Don't do this anymore. So it'd be funny, but like it's really like the fans are crazy. Ian, I know you've experienced stuff like that with records that you like, damn, we thought it was this one and it ends up being one that you probably ignored or something like that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think for me though, I Baroline's on point, but I try to separate myself from, you know, what should be great commercially, you know what I'm saying, and not, because that's I believe that that would probably be more Baroline's job than mine, you know, being at the label as opposed to me being at a publisher. But how I try to approach, you know, in the position I'm currently in is just helping the writer or the artist get the most out of themselves creatively and help them, you know, get pushed to that. So I look at them as a songwriter first, you know, like and you know, making sure that the collaborations and they can bounce ideas off me, they can be vulnerable with me. And I let everything take care of itself so that once we feel and they feel confident they have the great, music and compositions that they're putting together, folks like Baroline can come in and say, and they can figure out what can be commercially, um, you know, set up for a rollout and so on and so forth. Um, but I look at it as a songwriter first type of thing. And also shout out to Chip too, that
Amazing.
Caroline just mentioned. He's one of our writers as well, and Little Jew, who did Cash that Caroline mentioned early. I just wanted to shout out our guys too.
Yeah, B, you mentioned, you know, keeping your ears to the streets, and or I should say, you mentioned the streets, and I ask you, how do you keep your ears to the streets? Because there's a lot of new music that is circulating every day, every hour. There's probably a new artist that, you know, is uploading music for you guys to check out. So, what's the best way for you to keep your ears to the streets and also for these artists to get their music heard?
I think the biggest thing is just like seeing what's hot like online. Like you could tell hours and hours, the Priscilla, the writer, like that's hot right now. Like it's all over the internet, like TikTok, and that song got hot on TikTok, and a lot of artists are like blowing up on TikTok. But I found this weird thing where I see like these records that are really good, and I'm like, well, let me check it out on Apple Music, and then the whole record doesn't be really good. So I'm like, damn, like it's kind of like a little scam they got. They take that one part of the song that's amazing or that has a sample and they loop it on TikTok. And then when you listen to the whole song, you'll be like, oh, it's not worth it. So yeah, I have my ears to the street, but there's a lot, it takes a lot for me to want to sign an artist. I have to meet the artist. I have to see what their energy are. You can meet an artist that has so much personality online. And then the 1 minute you get in front of them, they're like, hey, I don't want to talk. Or like, they're like, who is this person? So just trying to find, like I said before, artists that really want to do work, because it's one thing to have a good record, but it's another thing to be a superstar and continue to have good records. So, and wanting to develop yourself to continue to make good music, you know? And I think like in the publishing side, it's good when you got guys bring these writers in and producers in to spark that light into these artists and make them superstars. I don't know how it is in the writing world, but I think I like to meet. I think probably writers, they can have any personality because they're like behind the scenes, right, Ian?
Yeah, I mean they can, but it's also you got to know that they have personalities that can mesh with folks that you already work with. You know, you got to have a vision for that, and that's why it is important to get a sense of who they are personality wise. But also, I look and see how people move before I even step into the picture. You know what I'm saying? Because I need an understanding of that, because then that helps me figure out how I can add value. Um, you know, a lot of writers, you know, which start off as artists initially, sometimes they don't have the success that it was all intended to have, or at least we all thought that they would have had it as an artist, but they end up making amazing songwriters. Or they're always artists, but they're not the biggest artists, but as a songwriter, they're like, you know, their hits double, you know, triple what they would have done as an artist. So it's always a thing that you just never want to paint anything with one broad stroke. You know, everything, I look at everything individually. I look at everyone's success or future success, I'll say, as individuals. And you try not to compare every situation, um, you know, in and of itself. So it really depends on you know the basics, who they are, stemming back to the stuff that we said before, who they are, what the motivation is. Um, are they gonna push themselves to evolve over time? Because that's a big thing too. You know, over the course of you know, music works fast. So over the course of maybe 2-3 years, you might have like a wave going on. You know, are they going to be the type that fit in that wave for that moment, or can they transcend a wave once it evolves into something else? And that's just something that I take account in and stock in, because as songwriters, you know, if you're somebody that can't get past that, or aren't or if you're not already thinking what the next potential wave could be, it's not to say that, you know, they can never be something that we do together, but just over time, you know, if you're not evolving, music's going to leave you behind. And so I know how I think, I know how how I roll, and where my innovation and inspiration leads me, and I look for folks that can match that.
I feel like a lot of writers nowadays are trying to become artists. What do you think about that? Like, do you think that's
I think, you know, look, I think it's interesting, but I also understand, you know, from songwriters' point of views, they've over time they've gotten the short end of the stick. You know, I don't want to go into the deep well of them getting the short stick in terms of, from a royalty basis. But they're trying to do things from trying to promote themselves to trying to stay relevant, try to keep content out there, because a lot of the times that content leads to more opportunities with working with other artists. So yes, we've seen a big uptick, on folks trying to be artists. The only thing that I would say as a publisher, that can be challenging is when there's an immense focus on being an artist, when someone initially probably started off as a songwriter, and you had a lot of success with putting them in rooms and working with other folks. But again, as a publisher, it's our job to support them either way, whether they want to be artists, whether they want to work towards writing for others. But also our job is to help support them, but also keep them in a space and keep them in a mindset that they're a songwriter first, and they can be great at a multitude of things. So keeping a focus on the most important thing, their craft, is our number one priority.
Caroline, you had mentioned, you get a lot of DMs and people saying, sign me, listen to my music. But quickly, what is the best piece of advice that you have for someone who wants to get their music on your radar? It probably isn't a DM. So what would it be for you?
I'd just be saying keep hustling. Like, it's crazy because every time an artist gets signed, I'll be like, let me check my DM if they ever hit me. And I'm like, damn, one day it's gonna be the next Drake, Travis Scott, and I'm gonna miss that motherfucker. And I'm gonna be so mad that I missed it. But I think like just keep hustling. Like a lot of artists come to my radar. I've signed a lot of artists that they didn't have 1 million followers, that didn't even have 500 followers. Like, I've signed artists like that. So I think just keep hustling, doing the work. Like, if you have some money, pay for features. Like, other artists are coming up. Some artists are coming up, don't even charge a lot at first. So just like, if you are able to make money and pay for features and stuff like that, like, just do it. Social digital marketing is also really good. So those things, just trying to figure out what your niche is and what you're good at. And it's hard. There's a lot of music out here. Like, I was just talking to somebody and they were like, do you know that almost like 400, they said a crazy number, comes out every Friday? And I'm like, man, what? Like, that's a lot of music. So like, it's kind of oversaturated, and just being one person, it's like, I can't sign everybody. I wish I could, but
Well, sliding in the DMs is not the way, okay? Make sure you
or
stay out the DM.
me, or spamming, creating a post that say tag Baroline. It'd be like 1,000 tags. I'm like, bro, what? Like,
This is not, it's not working. Just keep your head down, keep grinding, stay 10 toes down. If you're just now tuning in, we are here. This is the Pepsi Music Lab Virtual Summit of 2022. I am your host, Swaggy C. We're talking about maximizing your potential. I have Baroline, who is the VP of A&R Interscope, and Ian, Senior Vice President of Creative at Sony Music Publishing. Ian, let's talk about this real quick, because you're in publishing, and a lot of artists, sometimes they don't understand what publishing is. Sometimes they overlook it. And at least for me on the outside looking in, it can be pretty confusing. But can you briefly, I know this might be a little bit difficult, explain what ASCAP and BMI and the whole entire publishing world kind of is in a nutshell?
Yeah, so ASCAP and BMI are what you call PROs, which stands for Performance Rights Organizations. So what they do is they collect all money that's publicly performed in front of audiences. So anywhere from radio, television, to you literally walking in a mall and hearing this light tint of music in the background. Somebody's paying for that. Somebody's paying for the use of that. Even if it's just the instrumentals or the instrumentals behind a commercial that we sometimes don't even notice. Somebody's paying for that. When you're in the restaurant, somebody's paying for that. In clubs and in concerts, somebody's paying for that. So those are all ideas of a publicly performed royalty. And then the other side of the royalty is called mechanical royalties, which is now streaming. Before it used to be called mechanical, when there were actually physical sales, so CDs, vinyls, tapes, those were all considered mechanical royalties. But now mechanical royalties are mostly streaming, which also has, not to get too deep into it, which also has a performance royalty added to it as well too. So what we've seen in the last, I'd say 10 years is a big evolution of music, to where we're at now. We've gone from, I guess you could say 8 tracks to, well, I should say vinyls to 8 tracks to tapes to CDs to MP3s. Now we're at streaming. And that in a nutshell is publishing. Once you go outside the realms of the US and, across the pond, there's all different laws that make it, the deep dark, I'm not gonna say web, but the deep dark way of getting information, because it just changes, and that's I think the most intimidating thing that folks kind of feel from publishing, is just because it can get so granular and so deep. But it's all because in different territories, there's different laws and different ways of going about how they collect their income and their royalties. And you just have to be able to be nimble and kind of understand it. But you really don't understand publishing until you're in it. You could say that probably about a lot of businesses, but once you're in it and you're able to see, how it works and the type of deals that are done, everything is kind of unique in and of itself, which also makes it a challenge. There's no one standard way of doing business. There's no one standard way of having an agreement with a songwriter. But really, you could easily think of publishing as how I like to put it, the real estate game of the music business.
Right. Do you think that there is maybe can you give us actually one risk that an artist might run into by ignoring publishing? Maybe they miss out on tons of money or something.
Yeah. So one risk is, there's a time where, artists might start to get hot, right? And records might really start to go, and folks like myself and Baroline and others are all on edge trying to reach out to this artist, and we're all inspired and we want to do business with the artist, but the artist has in his mind a goal that they're trying to reach, let's just say, in money, in advance. They may not be where they're at, at that moment, but a lot of the times they'll just say, well, I'll wait. And that's the difficulty and the challenge that they can choose sometimes, because a lot of the times it's not a guarantee. Like I said, things move quick, so it's not a guarantee that it's going to be at the same pace that where it was 3 months, 6 months, 12 months from now. And it's not a guarantee that you're going to, the numbers or who you are as an artist is going to skyrocket. So the biggest risk that you can do is if you try to hold out and you've had songs that have been out for over 2 years or just about 2 years, you can risk us being able to even collect that. So with the way DSPs pay out, everybody has to pay out within a certain amount of time. And so like when we're going towards like a 3-month, 3-year, 4-year tier, if you've had content out, but you're still trying to get the perfect deal, if that's never been collected, there's a good chance we may never be able to collect it because that money's out the door. It's different than how publishing used to work years ago. 10, 15 years ago, you could have, again, going back to mechanical sales like vinyl and CDs and stuff like that, you can pull that money for years. You can go back 5, 6 years and still be able to collect income. But with everything being, for the most part, streamlined through DSPs, they have to get money. They have to get that revenue out by a certain time. And if you miss that mark, there's a really good chance that hurts your odds of being able to collect it, which at the end of the day hurts the advance of the money that you're looking to get.
Yeah, don't skip out on that publishing, okay? Shout out to everybody who is tuning in right now. You can follow the socials at Pepsi, and also, continue to check in with our YouTube right here. Let's get back into the creativity of the music. I'm talking about the producer. I personally feel like a beat can either make or break a record. Baroline, how do you usually find producers right now, and what qualities are you looking for somebody who is making these records or making these beats?
Well, with producers, like I really post on Instagram, like what producer has some beats, and then all of them, most of the producers have my personal number, like if I know them, and like they just send me beats, and I tell them like, let me know what specific artist is for. And then like I've been using like a lot of young producers. Like my favorite producers right now are like TNT, this kid named Pluto Brazy, who's like up and coming. Turn Me Up YC. Like there's a lot of bunch dope kids that's coming up, and it's just like I can just hear a beat and I'm like, okay, it fits this artist. Or sometimes an artist could be like, oh, all them beats sound like my regular songs. Like I want something else. So it's just letting them know what type of beat and sound the artist wants. Like ESTG likes a specific sound, and I know what producers he likes. He likes like Hellava or he
Forever
just
Rolling.
likes, yeah, like he likes Hellava. He likes what other producers he likes? DJ Spade, I think is his name. Like he just likes a bunch of producers. So like I don't even have to ask him what beats you want. He just likes those specifics. Forever Rolling, like is one of his main producers. So I already know what type of producers those artists like. Like the baby has been cooking up with this producer called A Basil from, he's from London, but he was out here, and he was the co-producer on some records that he put together. And I was like, maybe y'all should get in the studio together. And now he's like, oh, can he come back? Can he get in the studio with me? So, it's just building a sound. And like the baby, when he first started, he was making his biggest records were with Jetson Made. So it's just like I feel like when an artist finds that producer that they fuck with, gender, like they really have a vibe in the studio, you make your best hits with them. So I think it's all about the vibe and the creative process and how the producer cooks up their beats. Like some producers already have beats, or they come to the studio and cook up, and the artist tells them the direction that they want to go in. So it just depends on the vibe of the day and how the artist is feeling.
Well, obviously for you, it's different, getting these beats and retrieving them and getting them back to your artists. But for upcoming artists, where should they be looking for producers? Because I see, they're on YouTube or they're Googling beats that on different sites. So is there somewhere specifically that you guys may recommend that upcoming artists look for producers?
I would say Instagram, yeah, YouTube. We work with a platform called BeatStars that artists go to now and pull a ton of music from. So that's something that we partner with directly. And there's other platforms, but there's been a lot of success with folks just going to those and literally just finding tracks and just thumbing through producers that have had some success on there, and there's a lot of overseas producers on there as well too. So there's definitely platforms that you could either purchase beats flat out or just license them if you don't even have like the big so-called budgets that some artists or some labels might have.
Yeah, I see it. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I noticed that a lot of artists, they search these type beats. So if like you Google on YouTube, like a little Dirk type beat, like those beats pop up. But like Ian said, like you could license them, or these producers we have it, like you could borrow the beat for like 2 months. They be having all types of crazy stuff. So, but I have had crazy experience like that. Like I had one experience with an artist I signed, Smooth L. Man, we signed Smooth Out for a record, and the record was going crazy in New York. New Apollo was like going crazy. And he got the beat from YouTube. And then Travis Scott and Pop Smoke got the beat and got it cleared first. And I was on vacation in my bed crying, like, what? Like, and it's like this kid song was blowing up, but then you got two of the biggest artists in the world. That like Pop Smoke was like Pop Smoke at the time. He was smoking hot. So it's like, damn, what do you do? So, if you get that beat and you see like the momentum is growing on it, like reach out to the producer right away, do your paperwork, like paperwork is very important. Of course, you know, upcoming artists, they don't have all of that, but as you getting bigger and you see that the song is kind of moving, like you need to reach out to the person and be like, hey, can I get all the rights? Because man, I'll never forget when that happened. I was like, oh my God, I just signed this kid. This song is, you know, New Apollo. So you remember the song, how big it was in New York. Like, and then when Travis got it, I said, man, listen, I thought I was gonna get fired from work. And I just made these people sign this kid. Like, he's a star though. Like he had other records, but that was a little wild story. And he got the beat from YouTube. So
right. So I mean, look for the beats, you know, they're out there, but be careful and eventually, you know, get that paperwork on it if you see it moving. Earlier on Baroline, you mentioned, you know, finding certain artists and not really caring too much, you know, about their following. But if you see them doing the work on social media, you know, that, or even just in their music, you see that work coming and being consistent, you know, you will pay attention. How much do you pay attention though to the data and to the analytics when you're signing someone? Does, you know, social media actually matter to you at all?
I mean, it does. Like, when I worked at Columbia, I was only there for a little while. They were really big on research, and like the research was very important because you see records pick up and you're like, oh, I heard about this before, or let me reach out to this artist, and then you see it grow up, like you see it develop and get bigger. So I think research is very important, but once you find that artist and you see that record that's moving, you need to figure out what's the next record. Do they have another record that's moving? What's the next steps to take it to the next level with that artist? So yeah, research is important because you might be able to find out who's the next star, but then you have to do your own work and figure out, oh, do they have other records? Is they gonna be bigger than just one hit?
Well, you also said like TikTok, you know, they run that loop and sometimes it can really get you. But sometimes you have songs that go viral on TikTok and then you have an artist who could have steady numbers on SoundCloud. Is there, you know, somebody who you pay attention to more than another just because maybe it could have went viral on TikTok, but you know, this artist has been grinding it and going steady on SoundCloud? Which one are you going with and why?
I'm gonna go with whoever has the most records that I like, because I've seen people that have one record and then you go to a studio with them and you don't like the other records, and then you might find an artist that has a song that's kind of going, and then you hear other records that you're like, okay, this may be another one, or like, let's keep putting the work and we have something here.
Well, listen, this has been, you know, a very, very great conversation. I hope that everybody got their points in maximizing your potential. Thank you so much, Baroline and Ian, you know, for your time that you share with us during this Pepsi Music Virtual Lab Summit. It has, it's definitely been a pleasure.
Thank you for having
Swaggy C. Appreciate you guys for having us. This is dope.
Don't forget to visit PepsiMusicLab.com for all your latest updates surrounding the Pepsi Music Lab Summit. And also follow the socials at Pepsi for all of your latest updates. And make sure you're checking out that hashtag Pepsi Music Lab Summit.